I'll just say I've been involved in permaculture since the early 90s. I'm director of a small permaculture nonprofit called Earth Activist Training. We teach permaculture design with a grounding in spirit and a focus on organizing and activism. We teach a lot of permaculture design courses, and we also have an advanced permaculture regenerative land management. So we invite you to check that out. Hold on a second. Getting a message. My internet is unstable. So let me see if I can. Well, let's see if this works okay. And if not, I might have to log off and come back on again.
That's all good. I'll let you know if it gets a bit funny.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes it ends up connecting through my phone instead of through the internet itself. And I have to turn the phone off and make it sure, justice, and resilience. I think in permaculture, we know a better world is possible. We know we could be living in a world more in balance, more just, more beautiful, and more abundant. And a world where we are regenerating the ecosystems around us instead of destroying them. But what we have is this world full of disasters, oil spills, Fukushima, tar sands, fracking, climate change, leading to drought and floods and wildfires, all underpinned by racism, sexism, heterosexism, all of the isms, and fascism. This is one of my favorite quotes from Bill Mollison, and it's one that I can't help but think about multiple times a day right now here in the USA. Evil is stupidity, rigorously applied. So what does the power of the police against a protester or an immigrant have to do with the power of the oil and gas industry? I think it is simply this, that centralized power likes centralized power on every level. And to me, this ultimately goes back to a very deep time in our world, that when we look at the world, we tend to think what is sacred is something like this, something high and removed from the world, and pastel and light. What we think is sacred really determines what we give value to, and what we think is important, and what we think is important enough that it overrides our personal comfort or convenience. There's nothing wrong with this vision of the sacred. It's quite beautiful, but maybe we should also think about this as sacred, because truthfully, this has a lot more to do with the quality of our life, of our soil, of our food, than all the angels' trumpets up in the atmosphere somewhere. Or this, the web of mycorrhizal fungi and mycelium that holds together the soil and helps plants gather nutrients from further away. Or this, the cell that photosynthesizes, full of that miraculous chlorophyll that can take air and water and use the energy of sunlight to transform them into something completely different, into food. So what if this were our sacred icons? Or this? That brings us to our permaculture ethics. We care for the earth, that we care for people, and that we care for the future, which might mean sharing the surplus, reducing consumption, earth care, people care, fair share, which in our current day, in our capitalist society, is a pretty radical and political concept. In permaculture, we understand and value diversity, whether that's polyculture of plants or diversity of people, because we know diversity generates resilience and makes more intelligent. It gives us wider perspectives on the world. So when we think about how do we make change as permaculturalists, I think we also have to value diversity and understand that change has many different niches to fill. There's all the different forms of advocacy, lobbying, campaigning, media, building coalitions. So there's resistance and protest, which we're seeing a lot of now and need to see a lot more of here in the U.S. Sometimes it's providing resources and funding. This is a garden I'll be telling you about. We helped to build and to train a group of youth from public housing in San Francisco. It might mean doing research and data. There's a move in the permaculture world now to ground a lot of the things we know anecdotally work with actually getting the data that we can show scientists, yes, here's the numbers. Sometimes it means lawsuits and legal challenges, elections. So I wanted to show you a few examples of ways we've brought permaculture into action. Reclaim the Commons was a mobilization we did here in San Francisco. I think it was in 2004 when there was a big meeting of the genetic engineering people from around the globe that met here in San Francisco. And we entered a space nearby and set up a convergence center where people could meet and make decisions and mobilize. And as part of that, we created an indoor permaculture garden and held a number of different workshops there, teaching people some of the principles of permaculture. We had a little pond. We made seed balls, which are always popular. Right? We organized a counter-confrate ecofeminist from India who's done so much work on seed saving and countering the sort of pesticide industrial complex of industrialized agriculture. We decided to organize a really, really free market where we had things like seed balls, free seeds, free plants. We propagated hundreds and hundreds of plants so that we had some to give away, freebies. And then we took some of the plants and made a little garden in the street, and people locked down around it. And we actually blocked the entrance to the conference, one of the days of the conference. But we didn't just do that. We also brought people out and had a day of action in local parks where we built a cob bench. We built a container garden with some more of our plants in a community organization that was formed to counter police violence in the Black community. And we planted them a little tub garden, and it was great because months afterwards, I heard from people they were been eating out of that garden. It was called the Idris Stelly Foundation because it was named after a young man who had been killed by the San Francisco police when he was having a mental health breakdown in a movie theater. And this was many, many years before George Floyd or the Black Lives Matter movement even took off. We also brought permaculture into some of the big international protests. And in doing so, we would teach workshops and train people in permaculture. This was at the G8 protest in Scotland. We set up, information. We helped design the site and figure out what was going to go where and use our permaculture principles to organize that. We built composting toilets centered around wheelie bins so that the deposits could be easily moved out. We built walkways because this ground was, it was like glacial till that was so clayey that every footprint of every cow that had ever stepped on it kind of remained there, and you could hardly walk without breaking your ankles. And so we laid a track using mill hands from a local mill that were otherwise considered waste. We set up gray water systems, which turned out to be more of a challenge than we realized because we didn't really have time to do observation beforehand. Because time organizers came up with a SIP would intervene and we'd lose it. And we only got this site like a week, not even a week, a few days before we had to set up the convergence space. So when we got there and started digging our gray water pits, what we realized is in this soil, it wasn't that they drained slowly. It's like they just didn't drain at all until we accidentally dug into one of the old underlying clay drain pipes, and then they drained. People served food. We had a great connection with folks from Findhorn, the big eco-village in the north of Scotland. And then we had some very interesting examples of edge, where two different systems meet when people began the protests, particularly the clowns and the cops, because there was a little team that had for a year training people in clowning and creating clown affinity groups that, when they met the cops, when the cops would advance, instead of retreating or holding their ground, they would turn around in spirals and do a little dance. They were really quite hilarious, and truthfully, the police had no idea what to do with them. we also brought permaculture into action in some practical ways. In New Orleans, after Hurricane Katrina, the city was a disaster area. It had been flooded. The homes that weren't destroyed had to be gutted down to the bare wood because they'd sat in that water for a month and they were all full of toxic mold. And we did a number of things. We did cleanup. This is my friend Lauren Ross, who's an environmental engineer who organized testing so we could soil and if there were toxins in the soil, and then come up with a strategy for bioremediation. We used things like compost tea and EM, essential microbes. And so we treated this one house in February and June. This is what we found. We did sunflowers because they help remove lead from the soil. And I will say they really liked growing in New Orleans. Another example, I did this one, but I think it's one of the amazing examples of permaculture activism is in France. It's an area called Lazade, which means the autonomous zone. And this is a rough map of it. It's an area where the French government had wanted to build an airport back in the 60s, and the local farmers resisted. Some were bought out, and some of them insisted on staying, and they fought this airport for decades. Then in the early 2000s, a bunch of activists connected with them, and excuse me, many of them took over some of the farms that had been bought out and abandoned but never built on, and squatted them and started farming them and growing vegetables. They organized a bakery, they organized food distribution sites. And after many battles and many attempts to get them out, they declared it an autonomous zone, which is what ZAD stands for. Macron, when he was elected, finally canceled the airport. And I think this was like 2018. But then they proceeded to try to evict all the activists. And so some of the activists, as an act of resistance, decided to build a barn with old timber frame techniques that could last 1,000 years as a way of saying, we're staying, we're not going anywhere, we're taking root here. And it was quite an amazing undertaking, really beautifully built and beautifully designed. They have a whole sawmill that runs out of that barn, and they do sustainable logging in the nearby forest with horses. They now were able to get many of their places legalized or are in process of doing that. And they've really built a true community out of their activism. On a maybe slightly less dramatic scale, Earth Activist Training partnered for many years with an organization called Hunters Point Family in inner city San Francisco that works with youth from public housing. And they were running a couple of community gardens, but they didn't at that time have people with a lot of gardening skills. So we began doing some workshops and then working with the kids in the garden and planting trees. We brought in a group that plants trees called Common Vision in schoolyards. Kids love the garden. And it's a great chance for kids who live in the city, when there's a community garden, to actually get their hands in the dirt and experience nature. And we helped with both gardens, and we were finally able to hire coordinators from their community. One of the gardens moved to the parking lot of their office, and we built a garden there in containers and ran a permaculture to women from the public housing. And that's Miss Jackie, who is kind of the center of one of the gardens in Hunters Point. We are also involved in helping to fundraise and organize and support and permaculture until the Taliban took over, and then they had to flee to preserve their lives. So we were able to help them to fundraise together with an organization called Permaculture for Refugees that Rosemary Morrow is part of. She was also a big part of this effort and helped to raise enormous amounts of money and help a lot of refugees get out of danger and get resettled, mostly in Portugal, but also in a few other places. This is Arguna, who really loved the permaculture and was working in Portugal, helping with a woman's permaculture garden there. I think permaculturists have also been doing support for Ukraine, many of them through the Global Eco-Village Network, and we did some fundraising. The Permaculture Association of Britain kind of spearheaded this at the beginning of the war to help raise money for first aid kits for first responders. And I was able to go there a year ago and teach in a beautiful eco-village that's about 2 hours outside of Kiev. I have to say, where I was felt very peaceful and safe. The war wasn't raging in that area. But a lot of our students were internally displaced. Many of them had to leave their homes in the East. Many of them had friends and family that were still on the front lines or under occupation. Some of them hadn't been able to speak with their families for quite a long time. But I was very moved by the resilience and the energy of the people there. And there's a strong eco-village movement in Ukraine. I think if the war ever ends there, there will probably be an even stronger movement. And finally, I've been working with Alfred Decker, who's involved with Permaculture for Refugees, to organize a group of support for permaculture in Palestine. We've done outreach to groups who are in the West Bank, some in Gaza, also many who are in Lebanon or Syria or areas around there, or who are from that area but have had to emigrate or go for safety to some other place in Europe. And we invite you all to go. There is a petition at change.org. And once I stop sharing, I could put the link where have it afterwards. But we're encouraging people to sign the petition if you're in sympathy with it. And to join the organizing. And at the change.org, it will tell you how you can do that. Some groups are working on saving seeds, preserve seeds for that region and heirloom seeds. There was a seed bank in Bethlehem that the Israelis destroyed a few weeks ago. But luckily, there are also additional seed banks and backup seed banks in other places in Palestine, and it's really vital to do that work outside of Palestine where it can be safe. Some of us, like Earth Activist Training, we offer a lot of online courses, and we offer scholarships for Palestinians or other people from war zone areas who want to take the courses. Other groups in Europe and other places are looking for refuges. We don't want to encourage the depopulation of Palestine, but we know that sometimes people do really need to find somewhere else to be. So having a network of places that people can go is really vitally important. And that was something we really could have used to help with Afghan refugees as well. So all of those are various ways that we are doing permaculture and activism. And I don't know if there's a capacity for people to ask questions or make responses, but I wanted to leave some time for discussion for that to happen.
Thank you, Starhawk, for sharing that. And for anyone wanting to ask questions, to use the Q&A function, and Guy and I will field these questions and share them with Starhawk. Firstly, just wanted to say thank you for sharing everything that you do, Starhawk, both with us today and also wider with the world as well. Thank you. And Guy, if you wanted to say anything as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm giggling at myself a lot at how Toad's keeping me cool because he was an icon to them and all of us. So just to deflate that bubble a little bit, Toad. But yeah, no, it's so inspiring, the ripples of the work that you've done and how these impacts go beyond, what the current dominant avenues of support and change are, and really utilizing the design methodology to create new systems and structures that create that resistance really, really well. I have a question around, we've got such a weird meta crisis right now with so many overlapping challenges for so many different communities, and one of the threads that's come through quite a lot here has been just ensuring, like you said at the beginning, we value that diversity and we create environments for them to come together, and also with everything that's been going on, that seems to be getting harder with the polarization of everything. And so, how are you approaching gathering that in a time like now in the US, and what does that look like in terms of bringing people together and trying to get those diverse and different lived ways of being to collaborate under this fascist stress pressure systemically?
Well, I think the permaculture world holds opportunities for people who don't normally speak with a bunch of lefty, hippie, anarchist witches, and people like us. And a couple different ones. One, here in the US, in the ranching world, because of the work of Alan Savory with holistic management and with grazing, it's a type of grazing for people who might not be familiar with it, where you mimic the way that grasslands co-evolved with grazers by bunching your animals closer together and then moving them really often. So they graze down hard, and then you move them on, really bring it back till the grass has a chance to come back. And when you do that right, what it does is regenerates grassland. It can also sequester carbon. It can also help with water retention and with drought and with many, many other things. And it can allow you to raise more animals on the same amount of land than you'd be able to otherwise. And in that world, it's one place where, permaculturalists and kind of redneck ranchers actually meet and have common interests and common communication. The other place where I think it's easy to do outreach to people across barriers is around things like fire and preparing and doing what you can do with your land to make it more fire resilient and fire resistant. And that is a big movement here on the West Coast. A lot of people are doing prescribed burning now and bringing that back, and a lot of work being done on multiple levels to do the thinning and the pruning and the limbing up and the tending of the forest that helps make it both healthier and also more fire resilient. And again, that's something that crosses all the barriers, where people aren't asking who you vote for, but just, what can you do and what can you contribute to help make the place safer for all of us. So I think permaculture, because it focuses on some practical things and things that are really common to every human, like eating, can be a place where there's opportunities to make those bridges.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, collaboration as a necessity is a really brilliant design tool. And I think, finding those connection points where that shared value is a really strategic approach. Todd, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, I had a question in regards to doing permaculture and using permaculture to support displaced people or often vulnerable people. I was wondering what your framing was around it, because I know that permaculture sometimes gets the reasonable critique in some spaces of like permacolonialism. How do we do work to support people or work with people without just kind of engaging in green missionary work? I was wondering what your kind of experiences with that were, ideas, just open that up to have that conversation.
I think I've heard that critique of permaculture. I'm sure that there are groups or places where it's deserved, but I have to say a lot of times I feel like it's actually undeserved. I've seen so many permaculture projects and things that are going on that have been enormously empowering to people in the developing world and to communities here in the US that are targeted communities. So I think you can criticize Bill Mollison for a lot of things. Definitely for being sexist, right? But I will often tell some of my friends who are like, I remember one time in one course hearing somebody outside actually screaming and going out, and it was one of the women in our course had discovered his autobiography, in which I don't recommend if you want to continue thinking well of permaculture, and was literally screaming at the ground. And I told her, like, yeah, he was very sexist, but he also probably has kind of more benefit to more men living on the edge of poverty around the world than a whole lot of the sensitive new age guys who are much more politically correct. So it's not, and critique it. And with the colonialism, when I was in India, Convergence there, I met Narsana Kapila and Padma Kapila, this wonderful couple who have been doing work in their local community now. Took one of Bill Mollison's first verses, indigenous people there, helping them to get land, because legally they were allowed to, but often didn't know how to work the system to do it. And then encouraging them to grow food for their families rather than grow for the market, and working a lot with the women. And we met these women who now are teaching permaculture and going all over, and they're working with tens of thousands of indigenous farmers on a huge scale beyond anything we can imagine here in the US. And these women were so happy because they had some land, they were able to feed their families, they were empowered, their status had risen because now they didn't have to go to their husband their husbands came to them for food. They had theirs. And to me, that's an example of how permaculture can be empowering. Narsana learned from Bill. Narsana is Indian, but he's of a different class and caste than the people he was working with. And he worked with them in a way to transfer the skills and then empower others. And they've taken it, like I said, much further than any place I could imagine doing here in the US. So, I met another woman, Clea Chan Mal, there, who's working with hundreds of thousands of farmers. I met a guy named Ego Lamos from Timor-Leste, who's working in school, and people can take culture of it what they want. Here in the US, my friend Penny Livingston was my first permaculture teacher, taught a course at DQ University, which is a Native American university that was established as an act of resistance. They took over unused federal land and started this school. She did a course there years ago, and I still meet people who say, that was so empowering, it saved my life, and have gone on to do tremendous things in permaculture. So it's about remembering that permaculture principle of relinquishing power and making these skills and tools available to those who most need it. Earth Activists Training, which is our organization, that part of our mission is to bring these tools of regeneration to people on the front lines of struggle. And we try to do it sometimes by working directly with groups like Hunter's Point, in the lab, bring diverse people of color and real active I get a big difference in the permaculture movement things.
Sorry there, Starhawk. You just dropped out there for that
Yeah.
last little bit you were saying.
Oh,
Um, but thank you. And if you wanted to say that again, but
yeah.
also, um, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to. So you're on a really
Yeah.
beautiful tangent, and we lost that last little bit.
Okay. So, I was going to say, oh, what part of what I said did not you hear? But that's not going to work, really. If you, they wouldn't, you would have heard it, right? I was saying that we've
Yeah.
been offering diversity scholarships for people of color and for people on the front lines of struggles. And I think that's made a huge difference in the permaculture movement, certainly on the West Coast, but really all over the country. Um, and because our students have gone on and are doing phenomenal things, like one of our students from the Standing Rock Reserve in North Dakota, where there was that huge mobilization in 2016, I think, uh, against the oil pipeline. She's gone on to work with Women's Health Clinic there, planting herbal gardens and medicine gardens, and training lots of people on the reserve in permaculture. We have another student from Alaska who's working on food sovereignty for 6 different villages. There's tremendous people in all these communities who are just really inspiring organizers and activists, and just a little bit of support and a little bit of additional knowledge sometimes just makes all the difference.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. And we had a question come up that they said kind of answered it somewhat, because they wrote that while you were talking, and then I feel you answered it somewhat. And it was, how do we practice permaculture in, uh, I've seen some permaculture groups bring a paternalistic saviorism in some spaces. How do we practice permaculture in ways that do not create colonial, capitalist, imperial forms of globalization? For example, respecting indigenous sovereignty, knowledge, and ecology.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, respecting indigenous knowledge and sovereignty. Realizing, again, in permaculture, it's about building relationships. It's not about you saving anybody. And
Mm.
in order to be helpful to somebody, you have to actually create a relationship with that person, with that group. Um, so, I often teach a culture design course up at a place called OUR Eco Village in Columbia, Island. And they've done a really great job of building relationships with the local Cowichan Nation, their First Nations people, the area, over years. And they did it by being respectful, by going to the tribe when they first got land there and said, hello, we want to be your neighbors. We want to be respectful and be good guests here on the land. Um, Over time, as they developed friendships and relationships, we got invited to events on the reserve, like to dance or music events. And then one of the elders had a vision of doing a sacred walk for 4 years from one part of the island to the other. And from the eco village really supported that in very concrete ways, like joining the parties where they were cooking the food, or one year, like they made like dozens of baskets to give away, and Brandy, who ran the eco village, came there to help them with baskets. And we would be invited to the celebration at the end of the walk, and some people from our courses actually did the walk with them. And then we did a couple permaculture designs on the reserve for food forests. And a group of our students over went and installed the food forest at the elder's house. And now there's a really strong connection relationship where the board now, the Eco Village, is 60% indigenous, and they're designing and creating an indigenous medicine garden at the Eco Village that will be open to the local people. And we've been able to bring local people from the reserve into our trainings. And I'm co-teaching with an indigenous woman of the local tribe as well. So it become a real friendship. But it takes time. It's not instant. And it didn't happen because they went and said, "Hi, we do permaculture. Let us show you, how you should be living." They showed up in a humble way and respectful way and built a relationship first, and then all the rest of it flowed naturally.
Thank you for sharing that, and really, really resonating with what you're saying about the importance of relationality and the slowness of it, which seems so. I see so much of that in permaculture, and I also see these grand, big names going to places to go and save people as well, and just all of that under the umbrella of permaculture and navigating all of that. I saw you came off mute, Guy.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Starhawk. I want to really thank all of the work and time and communities and effort that has gone into how you see and understand this methodology. I think in the sort of Australian context, here we're going through a really big cultural reconciliation of how things are approached differently, and that then the what has been the assumed norm in the past has been sort of really critiqued quite deeply, and it's beautiful to see this through your eyes, through a practice of it in right relationship to benefit community and relationship. And I think this, really exploring what the edges are of what permaculture is, and what is very real, and the challenges that we have here in Australia, and also where are the ways that we need to orient towards. So thank you for all that work. It's very evident in just everything that you say, and how, and I hope that that is something that we can all move towards. One of the questions that we've been returning to a little bit from one of our first speaker on day one, Dr. Jessica Hutchings, who's a Māori Wahine and Indigenous person from Aotearoa, an elder of mine, who shared an amazing session, but also left a prompt from a thought leader who's passed now, called Moana Jackson, about acting as if, and how we position ourselves in this space. And I'm really feeling, the beauty of what drew me to permaculture in the first place, and what I can see as possible, and also sitting with the challenges of it. And so my question to you is, the term is what, how do you approach this when dreaming into the world? How do you act as if, and what is that if?
I think it's interesting because that a magical teaching, and from the other side of my work, the more spiritual, witchy side, we'll often say with magic, fake it until it gets real, right? Like there's teachings, I think, from the Jesuits Dion Fortune quotes them a lot. She was an English occultist in 20th century, but she would say that if you put yourself in the position of prayer, you'll start to feel like praying. And that if you act as if it doesn't mean you won't be able to do things you actually don't know how to do or claim something you aren't really entitled to. But if, for example, you act as if the world is going to continue and not self up, then you're going to be making decisions that are going to lead to a more viable future than if you act as if we're all doomed and it's hopeless. If here in the U.S. we're facing this huge crisis of authoritarian fascism, and a lot of people are scared and self-censoring and not speaking out. But if you act as if you had the right to speak and say what you believe and stand for what you believe, you are actually defending that right and holding that space and making it harder for them to pose restrictions in the period. And
Thank
I
you.
think that's how I see that term.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's very inspiring, especially from the context of what America is going through, and our big love and gratitude and power through the series to you and all of the actions and communities I'm sure you're a part of with what is going on. We have two other questions in the chat here. One of them from Alex, who I believe is in the US. I believe you commented on day one. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in industrialized capitalist places like California, corporate interests dominate land ownership. How do we reclaim enough land to do things like permaculture? So I guess it's a question on land access and how that's being navigated.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a challenge. There are some ways, a lot of land is owned now by older people, and a lot of those older people can't manage that land by themselves. So there are potentials for trading elder care, trading land care for eventual ownership, or at least for access. There are organizations that help retiring farmers connect to young aspiring farmers and come up with agreements so that they can take the land. There are some trusts done a lot, but it's a vision of a regenerative land trust that could some of the land, because something like half the land in North America due to change hands over the next 10 years because farmers are out all over. And if we could get that into regeneratives, it would make an enormous difference, I think, in climate change and everything else. And right now we're seeing this immense farm crisis in the U.S. Because of Trump's tariffs, where these are not the permaculture farmers, they're regular industrial scale farmers, but a lot of them are also family farms that sell soybeans and stuff to China. And Trump went through this giant tariff on everything from China, stopped buying our soybeans. And farmers are going bankrupt left and right. And again, it's that Bill Mollison quote, evil is stupidity rigorously applied. But a lot of that is going to change hands. And if there's any billionaires out there looking for what to do with money, form a big regenerative land trust, buy up the land, it get in the hands of those farm and shift it into regenerative systems. And that could make a huge difference.
Thank you. And if there are any billionaires listening right now, absolutely, absolutely do that. We know many wonderful places that can go. We've got a question from Erin here. Thank you, Starhawk. We know some superstars here who teach self-defense training for our increasingly more hostile protests here in Nam, or so-called Melbourne. The idea of using the crafty art of clowning to perplex cops sounds genius. Could you please repeat the name of the clown crew? So yeah, back into how permaculture exists in protest.
It was John Jordan who trained the clowns. He also is one of the people who started Lazad and also Isabel, I don't know her last name. And what did they call it? And they had a great acronym for it, and it's escaping me right at this moment, but maybe I'll think of the end of this. It was something cloudy. Circa, I think it was called. It all stood for the clown army at the end. But yeah, having creative ideas and finding ways, like I've also done a lot over the years, including in places like Palestine, where you're going up against the military, real potential for loss of life or serious violence. And I think training is really, really helpful. And whether it's clown training or nonviolence training or self-defense training, I think can be helpful too. It's not that you necessarily want to fight it out with cops, but just the kind of training that keeps you able to stay calm, keep your head, think out what you want to do, and not just freeze up or scream when something happens, but actually have a plan, know how you're going to respond. All of that can really be helpful in crisis situations. And they are getting more and more, I think, all over the world.
Thank you so much for answering that, Starhawk. And thank you for coming today and sharing the wealth of history that you have in regards to the intersections between activism and permaculture and bringing a bit of spirit into this work. It's deeply appreciated the way that you orientate yourself to this work and kind of share that with others in ways that uplifts them to take them on their own as well. Thank you so much for your time today. We deeply appreciate this generosity. Did you want to share anything, Guy?
Support everything that Toad said. Thank you so much for your last work and for every influence that you've had. It's been, incredible to experience. So thank you for coming along and sharing a little bit more.
Thank you too. And see, I don't have the link at my first, but truthfully, if you just Google Permaculture for Palestine.org petition, that's probably an easier way to find it because the link is very long and complicated. And that will take you there and it be to get even more people signed up on that. And thank you all for doing this. And so permaculture is political.
Thank you. If someone wants to just chuck into the questions, what was that link? We'll respond with that link as well, so you can all respond. Please flood the Q&A with your love for Starhawk. And yes, thank you so much for your time. And we'll go into a quick, maybe 3-minute bio break between now and our next speaker. And yes, just thank you so much, Starhawk, for your time.
Oh, and I should tell people I have a Substack, which is starhawk.substack.com, where I've been working on a book called The Movement We Need on moving. And I also have a podcast with the same name. You can find it on any of the places where you find podcasts. And it talks about movement building, a lot about permaculture. While I was traveling this summer, I did a lot of interviews with some amazing people that are doing permaculture and community organizing in many different parts of the world. So starhawk.substack.com. And our Earth Activist thing is earthactivisttraining.org. And we have online permaculture courses. So you can take one of our classes if you're interested. We have things from rainfall remediation to disaster preparation to social permaculture and facilitation, and an advanced program in regenerative land management. So that's my short commercial announcement. And now I'm going to go have dinner.
Amazing.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Definitely take advantage of those amazing resources and educational opportunities, and we will make sure that those resources are sent out as well afterwards in the wrap up. So thank you. Alrighty.